It is a Tuesday in August. The temperature outside hits 94 degrees. You flip on the air conditioner. The refrigerator is running. Maybe a well pump kicks in. And then the inverter dies. No warning. Just a fault code blinking on a unit that worked perfectly through 4 summers before this one. That timing is the part nobody explains. The inverter did not fail on delivery. It passed your first winter, your second summer, your third. It looked like a goodbye. Then year 5 arrived. The load got heavy. The heat got serious, and something inside gave out quietly. The question is not whether the unit was cheap. The question is what was accumulating inside it unseen, every time it ran hot. That is the forensic problem this video is built around. The symptoms usually start small enough to dismiss. The inverter shuts down for 10 minutes on a hot afternoon, then comes back on its own. You check the app, see a fault code you do not recognize and assume it was a glitch. The loads flicker. The fan runs louder than usual. You leave it alone because it seems to recover. That recovery is the trap. Most owners first notice the problem during peak conditions. A July afternoon, full solar production, the battery bank charging hard, the inverter sitting in a garage or an RV compartment with no airflow. That combination pushes thermal load past what the cooling system can handle. The inverter does not fail immediately. It derates first, cutting output to protect itself. Then, if the heat keeps climbing, it shuts down entirely. Here is the real issue. Derating and thermal shutdown are protective functions. They worked as designed. But an inverter that throttles itself every hot afternoon is not a reliable power source, regardless of whether it survives the episode. Owners in online forums describe the same pattern. Faults appear during heavy appliance use. Restarts happen every 30 to 40 minutes. The enclosure is too hot to touch. Some report the fan cycling on and off rapidly, which signals the thermal management is already operating at its limit. The symptoms look scattered. A shutdown here, a fault code there, reduced output that is easy to attribute to cloud cover. But when you line up the conditions each time, the pattern holds. Heat, load, and poor ventilation appear together every time something goes wrong. That is not coincidence. That is accumulated thermal stress finally making itself visible. So the obvious answer is cheap parts. Cheaper capacitors, lighter heat sinks, weaker cooling fans, boards packed too tightly with components rated right at their limits. That explanation is not wrong, exactly. It is just incomplete. Here is the real issue. Price does not predict failure on its own. Some budget inverters run for a decade in well-ventilated installations. Some mid-range units fail in 3 years because they were boxed into a compartment with no airflow. The mechanism is not the price tag. The mechanism is heat removal. What matters is whether the thermal design can continuously move heat out of the enclosure under real sustained load, not peak load tested in a lab for 20 minutes, but the kind of load that runs for 4 hours on a summer afternoon. That is a different engineering problem, and it costs money to solve correctly. Budget designs often skip that investment, but calling it a parts problem misses why the parts matter. The spec sheet sells electrical capacity, peak wattage, continuous output, efficiency percentages. None of those numbers tell you how the unit behaves at 80% load when ambient temperature is 38 degrees Celsius and the enclosure has 2 inches of clearance on each side. Lifespan is not decided at the electrical level. It is decided at the thermal level. That distinction changes everything about how you evaluate an inverter before you buy one. Here is where that thermal failure actually starts. Inside the enclosure, every watt of conversion loss becomes heat. A 500-watt inverter running at 95% efficiency is dumping 25 watts of heat into a sealed metal box. Every hour, every day, across thousands of operating cycles. Cheap designs handle that heat badly. The heat sinks are undersized, sometimes by a wide margin. The thermal pads between components and the heat sink are thin or mismatched. Board layouts pack high heat components close together with no breathing room. The fans are small, slow, and clog quickly with dust. The vents are narrow slots that trap particulates rather than flush them out. What that creates is a box that heats from the inside out, with almost no margin before critical components cross their rated temperature ceiling. Then you add ambient heat. An inverter mounted in a garage in July, bolted to a south-facing wall, tucked into a van cabinet, or sitting in a utility shed with poor ventilation does not start at room temperature. It starts at 35 or 40 degrees Celsius before a single watt flows through it. The thermal headroom it was barely designed for disappears before noon. Here is what makes this a trap. Nothing on the spec sheet reveals it. The rated wattage is accurate. The voltage range is real. The efficiency figure is technically correct under controlled lab conditions. The unit passes its own advertised numbers and still thermally degrades every time the afternoon load peaks and the enclosure temperature climbs. The damage is invisible, cumulative, and almost never traced back to heat until the unit dies. So why does it pass the first 2 years without incident? That question is what makes this problem so hard to catch. When components are new, they absorb stress more cleanly. Fresh electrolytic capacitance. New solder joints conduct without resistance spikes. Semiconductors run with intolerance even under repeated thermal cycling. The degradation clock starts at installation, but the effects are not immediate. Earlier reviews reflect that window. Most buyers post impressions within weeks of setup, sometimes within days. They report clean output, quiet operation, stable readings. Those reviews are accurate. They are just not measuring the right time frame. Light usage reinforces the confidence. An inverter running a few lights and a phone charger is nowhere near thermal stress. The problems emerge when real load stacks up. A hot afternoon, high solar input pushing the system hard, multiple appliances running simultaneously, ambient temperature already elevated before the unit starts work. That combination is not unusual. It is a normal summer day, but it rarely happens in the first month of ownership. To understand why the failure feels sudden, consider what precedes it. Thousands of hours of accumulated heat damage that never triggered a visible symptom. Solder joints that cracked microscopically and healed slightly, then cracked further. Capacitors that drifted slowly out of spec. Fans that moved a little less air each season. The damage is not one event. It is the sum of every hot operating hour the unit ever ran. Here is where that accumulated damage becomes mechanical. Each component in the chain fails on its own schedule, but they are not independent. They accelerate each other. Start with the capacitors. Electrolytic capacitors store and smooth electrical energy, and they depend on a liquid electrolyte to do it. Heat causes that electrolyte to evaporate slowly over time. As it degrades, capacitance drops, and equivalent series resistance climbs. The component that once stabilized voltage now introduces instability. It does not fail visibly. It just becomes worse at its job, quietly, year by year. Thermal cycling compounds this. Every day the inverter heats up under load and cools down overnight. That repeated expansion and contraction stresses solder joints at the microscopic level. It fatigues connector interfaces and insulation. Power semiconductor packages, which are bonded to substrates under pressure, begin to delaminate fractionally. Each cycle adds strain that the material never fully recovers from. Then the fan degrades. Dust accumulates on blades and clogs intake vents. Bearings wear. Airflow drops. The thermal load that the cooling system was originally sized to handle now exceeds what it can actually move. Internal temperatures rise faster, stay elevated longer, and push every already weakened component harder. Here is the real issue. These failures do not occur in isolation. Reduced cooling stresses the capacitors faster. Stressed capacitors create voltage irregularities that increase thermal load on semiconductors. Fatigued solder joints add resistance that generates additional localized heat. Each degraded part makes the next failure easier to reach. By year 5, the inverter is not running on worn components. It is running on a system where every margin has quietly collapsed at once. That collapsed margin is what makes year 5 so dangerous. Not because every cheap inverter dies on schedule, but because 5 years is when several independent pressure clocks tend to align. 5 hot summers means 5 full cycles of thermal stress on every component. Thousands of charge and discharge cycles have fatigued solder joints that were never premium to begin with. Dust has had years to restrict airflow, and the capacitors that were already undersized are now running on depleted electrolyte. None of those clocks reset. Warranty timing makes it worse. Many budget units carry 2 or 3 year coverage. By year 5, that window is long closed. A repair bill that might have been absorbed under warranty now lands entirely on the owner, and replacement parts for discontinued budget models are often unavailable or priced close to the cost of a new unit. Here is the real issue. Failure at this stage rarely arrives as a clean shutdown. It arrives as derating. The inverter runs, but it cannot sustain the loads it handled at installation. It throttles output on warm afternoons. It trips under moderate draw. The system technically works, but it delivers less than the household needs precisely when demand peaks. Here is the real issue. Failure at this stage rarely arrives as a clean shutdown. It arrives as derating. The inverter runs, but it cannot sustain the loads it handled at installation. It throttles output on warm afternoons. It trips under moderate draw. The system technically works, but it delivers less than the household needs precisely when demand peaks. Installation environment shifts the timeline in either direction. A rooftop unit in a hot climate with poor ventilation may reach this inflection point at year 3. A basement installation in a moderate climate might reach year 7 before symptoms appear. Year 5 is not an expiration date. It is where the odds turn. So now you know how the failure unfolds. The question is why so many buyers never see it coming. And the answer starts at the product listing. Most budget inverter marketing is built around numbers that feel impressive and mean almost nothing for long-term thermal performance. Peak surge wattage is the clearest example. A unit might advertise 5,000 watts but only sustain 3,000 under real continuous load. That gap is not hidden. It is just labeled in a way that most buyers skip past. Efficiency ratings get the same treatment. 97% conversion efficiency sounds authoritative. But efficiency at what temperature, at what load percentage, and tested under what ambient conditions? The spec sheet rarely says. High efficiency under ideal lab conditions tells you nothing about how the unit behaves on a 90-degree afternoon running at full draw. Glossy monitoring apps and green branding do the rest of the work. They signal sophistication and environmental alignment. Neither predicts whether the heatsink has enough mass to hold temperature under sustained load, or whether the fan can be accessed and cleaned, or whether the enclosure requires clearance that the installation manual quietly buries on page 18. The questions that actually matter are almost never on the product page. What is the operating temperature ceiling? Does the unit derate, and at what threshold? How conservative are the published ratings? What certifications cover real-world thermal cycling, not just peak output? When buyers skip those questions, they are not being careless. They are responding rationally to the information they were given. The spec sheet was designed to close a sale, not to predict a replacement. So the spec sheet was designed to close a sale. Here is what that costs you in practice. Replacement is the obvious expense, but the bill usually starts before that. A diagnostic visit from an electrician to confirm the inverter is the problem, not the panels or the battery bank, runs anywhere from 1 to 3 hours of billable time. Shipping a failed unit back under warranty, if the warranty still applies, often falls on the owner. And warranty exclusions for inadequate ventilation or improper installation are common enough that many budget inverter owners find themselves paying full replacement cost regardless. Then there is everything the dead inverter takes with it. A refrigerator running off a home battery system, an off-grid cabin losing power mid-summer, an RV with a fully charged battery bank that cannot convert a single watt because one sealed box with a failed thermal cutoff is blocking the entire circuit. The panels are fine. The batteries are fine. The wiring is fine. One small inexpensive component shuts down everything connected to it. Repairability makes it worse. Sealed enclosures. Fans pressed into housings with no service access. Replacement control boards that are either unavailable or cost nearly as much as a new unit. No local technician trained on that specific product. The inverter was cheap to buy and expensive to be stuck with. Here is the point going forward. The goal is not to spend more money. It is to avoid designs that are structurally vulnerable to heat from the start. That is a different question than price, and it has a real answer. So here is the real answer, and it is not complicated. Start with the temperature specification. A credible inverter lists continuous output power at a specific ambient temperature, typically 40 or 45 degrees Celsius, not just peak wattage in ideal lab conditions. If the spec sheet only shows a single maximum number with no temperature qualification, that number means nothing in a hot attic or a sun-exposed enclosure. Ask for the derating curve. That is the chart showing how output drops as temperature rises. Reputable manufacturers publish it. Budget units often do not. No derating data means no honest thermal design. And no honest thermal design means you are trusting marketing instead of engineering. Check the certifications. UL, CE, and TUV are not guarantees, but they indicate independent testing occurred. Certifications specific to the installation environment, marine, RV, or off-grid carry more weight than general consumer ratings. Then inspect the cooling physically. Can the fan be replaced without destroying the enclosure? Are the vents positioned to move air through the heatsink, not just across a sealed shell? Does the installation manual specify clearance distances? If it does not, that is a red flag. Look at the reviews for one specific phrase. Shuts down in heat. Owners report thermal cutoffs honestly. The manufacturer will not. The red flags stack quickly. Vague temperature claims, warranty under 1 year. No replacement parts listed. Documentation that runs 2 pages. Any one of these is a caution. Several together is a pattern. Cheap is not the trap. Cheap with no thermal evidence is the trap. Those are 2 different things, and now you can tell them apart. Here is the real issue. Failure at this stage rarely arrives as a clean shutdown. It arrives as derating. The inverter runs, but it cannot sustain the loads it handled at installation. It throttles output on warm afternoons. It trips under moderate draw. The system technically works, but it delivers less than the household needs precisely when demand peaks. Judge the box by heat. If you are buying now or replacing a failed unit, run the audit from this video before you commit. Drop your inverter model in the comments. Tell us what the spec sheet showed or did not show. If this helped you avoid the trap, subscribe, because this channel keeps pulling at exactly these kinds of problems.